You walk up to the Sphinx and the stone tells a story. Vertical cracks run deep, undulating walls, limestone eaten back in waves. Every geologist who looks at this monument sees weathering, but they don't agree on what caused it. Rain carving grooves over 10,000 years, or salt crystals expanding in cracks over 4,500. The Giza Plateau holds the oldest monument in Egypt, and we've been getting the erosion wrong. 1991. The annual meeting of the Geological Society of America. Robert Schoch stands at a podium with slides of wavy limestone walls. He's a Boston University geologist. He says the Sphinx enclosure shows precipitation weathering, vertical erosion, deep fissures following joints in the bedrock. The patterns match rainfall runoff. The problem sits 4,500 miles from Boston in the Sahara Desert, where it hasn't rained much for 5,000 years. But when he examined the enclosure walls, he saw weathering he couldn't explain with wind and sand alone. Member 2 makes up the Sphinx body and most of the enclosure walls. Member 3 forms just the head. Member 2 contains alternating layers of normal limestone and marly limestone rich in clay that weathers faster when wet. He measured weathering extending 6 to 8 feet below the current floor level on the north, south, and east sides. On the west side, at the rump, he found only 4 feet of weathering. Wind erosion looks different. It creates horizontal bands and sharp angular faces, not vertical channels. The tomb of Debehin, carved in 4th Dynasty, times 75 feet higher on the plateau, shows wind erosion patterns with flat vertical surfaces preserved. Schoch ran seismic tests. His team used sledgehammers on steel plates to generate sound waves. The waves penetrated the rock, reflected, and returned to sensors. Sound travels slower through weathered porous rock than through solid bedrock. The data showed weathering extending 1.8 to 2.5 meters below the enclosure floor on 3 sides. On the west side, only 1.2 meters. Schoch argued this proved two-stage construction. The core body carved in wet climatic conditions before 5,000 BC. The rump added during Khafre's time around 2500 BC when conditions were already arid. This script is researched and factual using sources from peer-reviewed geological papers published in the Geological Society of America, annual meetings, and from Mark Lehner's doctoral dissertation, Archaeology of an Image, completed at Yale in 1991, which compiled 5 years of fieldwork mapping the Sphinx between 1979 and 1983, and from James Harrell's 1994 analysis in the journal KMT, titled The Sphinx Controversy, Another Look at the Geological Evidence. Now back to the information. But between 14,500 and 5,000 years ago, something changed. The desert turned green. Grasslands spread across what's now sand. Lakes formed. Lake Megachad expanded to cover 42,000 square miles, 10 times its current size, becoming the largest lake on Earth. Rivers flowed. The Sahabi River, the Kufra River. Sediment cores from the Niger River Delta show low salinity between 11,500 and 5,000 years ago when fresh water diluted the Atlantic. Marine sediment cores off Mauritania show low dust flux during the same window. When vegetation covers ground, wind can't pick up particles. The Green Sahara lasted until around 5,000 years ago, then it collapsed. Ocean sediment records show an abrupt increase in dust around 5,000 years before present. Terrigenous flux from Africa into the Atlantic jumped. The transition took only 1 to 2 centuries. Vegetation disappeared, desert returned. He initially proposed a date of at least 5,000 BC. Later, he pushed it back to 9,700 BC, aligning with the end of the last ice age around 10,000 BC. If true, this predates Egyptian civilization by thousands of years. No pyramids yet, no temples, no hieroglyphic writing, no pharaohs, just Neolithic hunters and pastoralists. Mark Lehner had spent 5 years mapping the Sphinx. He documented every stone block, every repair layer, every geological member. His 1991 Yale dissertation runs over 800 pages. Lehner found clear architectural connections between the Sphinx Temple, the Valley Temple, and Khafre's Pyramid Causeway. The temples sit on a broad terrace carved from the same bedrock as the Sphinx enclosure. When workers quarried the Sphinx body, they removed massive blocks. Those blocks built the temple walls. The limestone fossil fingerprints match. 4th Dynasty pottery from 2575 to 2465 BC fills the Sphinx quarry floor. New Kingdom restorations came later, but the original work dates to Khafre's reign around 2500 BC. One master plan. If the Sphinx was carved thousands of years earlier, why would the southern wall anticipate a causeway built millennia later? The architectural sequence doesn't work. The Dream Stele, placed between the Sphinx's paws by Thutmose IV in 1425 BC, contains a partially damaged inscription. The surviving syllable reads Kaf, suggesting Khafre. In 1853, French archaeologist Auguste Mariette found a life-size diorite statue of Khafre in the Valley Temple. Startlingly realistic. Black volcanic stone, It now sits in the Egyptian Museum. Mariette also found remnants of a stone causeway connecting the Valley Temple to Khafra's mortuary temple. In 1925, French engineer Émile Barrès discovered the Sphinx Temple directly in front of the monument. Its ground plan mirrors the Valley Temple, same architectural style, same period. Pottery and inscriptions dating to mid-4th dynasty. Nearby Lenner found the lost city of the pyramid builders, barracks and houses for thousands of laborers, food storage, bakeries, all dated to Khafra's time. The infrastructure to build a colossal monument. No similar evidence exists from earlier periods. No pre-dynastic settlement capable of quarrying 73 meters of limestone. So if the architectural and archaeological evidence points to 2500 BC, what about the erosion? The weathering is real, undeniable. Geologists on both sides agree the Sphinx has deteriorated significantly. The question is what caused it and when. James Harrell, professor at the University of Toledo, studied the Giza limestone. He published his analysis in 1994 in KMT Journal. Harrell proposed haloclasty, salt crystallization weathering. Fine layers flake off. The process is called haloclasty. Their analysis concluded continual salt crystallization explains at least some of the deterioration. The expanding crystals have a destructive effect. Lal Ghauri, a geologist who worked on Sphinx conservation, argued that dew provides the moisture. Each night condensation forms. Each morning it evaporates, leaving salt residue. Over centuries, the cumulative damage adds up. Wind-blown sediment accumulated around the body. Only the head remained visible for long periods. In the 1st century, A.D. Pliny the Elder described the monument already ancient. By medieval times, only the head emerged from dunes. Sand is porous, it absorbs water. Rainfall and occasional Nile floods would have soaked the sand cover. The wet sand sat against the limestone for months at a time. Water seeped into the stone, salts dissolved. Crystals formed. The buried portions of the Sphinx weathered faster than exposed structures higher on the plateau. The tomb is also carved from Member 3 limestone, which is harder and more resistant than the Member 2 limestone of the Sphinx body. Shush compared monuments from different stratigraphic levels. The comparison doesn't hold. They weren't exposed to the same conditions. Colin Reeder, a British geologist, studied the erosion patterns and found them concentrated on the western enclosure wall, less on the Sphinx itself. Reeder proposed that rainfall runoff during climate transitions could explain this without requiring a pre-dynastic date. Heavy rains occurred until the end of the Old Kingdom around 2200 BC. Judith Bunbury, a Cambridge geologist, analyzed sediment samples from the Nile Valley. She found evidence that climate change in the Giza region began early in the Old Kingdom, with desert conditions arriving late in the era. Rainfall didn't end abruptly 5,000 years ago. It declined gradually through the 3rd millennium BC. Harrell and other critics noted inconsistencies in the velocity readings. The boundary between weathered and sound limestone was picked subjectively. Line S3 at the western end showed consistently lower velocities for both weathered and sound rock. If the boundary was set incorrectly, it would produce artificial differences. More importantly, weathering below the floor doesn't prove age. It proves exposure to water. The floor has been excavated and reburied multiple times. Water infiltrated through natural joints and faults in the bedrock long before the Sphinx was carved. Pre-existing fractures allowed rainwater to seep down. This paleokarst weathering occurred when the Sahara was wetter but before human activity. The cracks were already there when 4th Dynasty workers started carving. In 2025, geophysicist Robert Schneiker presented a paper at the Geological Society of America annual meeting. Schneiker argued that everyone has been wrong, both mainstream archaeologists and alternative theorists. He claimed there's very little actual erosion on the Sphinx. What looks like erosion is construction technique. The ancient Egyptians used stone pounders and copper chisels to carve monuments. The Member 2 limestone in the Sphinx body was too soft in places to carve cleanly, so workers pounded the weathered layers back, creating a rough surface. Then they covered it with a veneer of high-quality limestone blocks from Tura quarries. These blocks were sculpted to form the finished surface of the Sphinx body. Sand protected the lower portions. Over millennia, looters removed the veneer blocks. Without the protective casing, the rough pounded bedrock beneath was revealed. This rough surface has been misidentified as water erosion. Schneiker points to evidence from the Osiris shaft located on the causeway halfway between the Sphinx and Khafra's pyramid. The shaft descends through the same Member 2 limestone. The walls show similar rough, weathered appearance, but chisel marks on the harder protruding layers prove there has been minimal erosion since ancient times. The rough surface was an intentional part of the quarrying process. The Nile River. Enhanced monsoon rainfall during the humid period produced extraordinary floods. The Nile swelled to unprecedented levels. Sediment cores show massive discharge. The Sphinx sits just meters above the river. With 400 millimeters of annual rainfall feeding the Nile, the flood plain would have inundated the monument. The soft, marly limestone of Member 2 wouldn't have survived repeated flooding. The Sphinx would have been destroyed, or at minimum show a bathtub ring of erosion at the high water mark. No such ring exists. The weathering is concentrated on the upper walls, not at flood level. Archaeologists look at architectural context, artifact sequences, and cultural continuity. When the two disciplines conflict, which evidence takes priority? Mainstream Egyptology argues for integrated analysis. The Sphinx can't be understood in isolation. It's part of a complex. The enclosure shape respects pre-existing tomb boundaries. The southern wall aligns with the causeway. The temples use enclosure limestone. 4th Dynasty pottery fills the quarry. Workers lived in dated settlements. All these pieces fit together around 2500 BC. Archaeology. These anomalies deserve investigation. But anomalies alone don't overturn convergent evidence from multiple sources. No written records. Just the Sphinx, standing alone for thousands of years until dynastic Egyptians arrive and coincidentally build temples using limestone from its enclosure. The archaeological silence is deafening. Astronomical alignments with Leo in 10,500 BC. These ideas are popular. They sell books and documentaries, but they're not supported by physical evidence. No artifacts from pre-dynastic Giza, no infrastructure, no cemeteries, no agricultural surplus storage, no bakeries for feeding construction crews, nothing. Kenneth Feder, an archaeologist, notes the absence is fatal to the hypothesis. Building the Sphinx required resources. Where did they come from? Averaging 2.5 tons each, Khafra matched it with his pyramid 10 feet shorter, but on higher ground appearing taller. Menkaure added a third. The Giza complex represents 3 generations of architectural ambition. They needed organization, planning, and labor. The 4th Dynasty had all 3. The worker cemetery proves it. The lost city proves it. The pottery proves it. The architectural integration proves it. The limestone fossil matches prove it. Harrell isn't wrong to propose haloclasty. Schneiker isn't wrong to suggest construction technique. The truth likely combines multiple factors. Some paleokarst, weathering before carving, some construction roughness, some salt crystallization over centuries, some wind erosion, some water damage from occasional rains and floods through the Old Kingdom. The Sphinx has been deteriorating since day one. 2 massive stones fell from the monument in the 1980s, masonry veneer from the left hind paw in 1981, a large bedrock piece from the right shoulder in 1988. On windy days, flakes blow off the enclosure walls. The Supreme Council of Antiquities spent the 1990s doing major restoration, not the first repairs. The 18th dynasty around 1400 BC conducted the earliest large reconstruction. They quarried limestone from Khafra's causeway to repair the body. They added masonry boxes to the flanks. They placed a royal chapel at the chest. This was 1300 years after Khafra. If the Sphinx erodes rapidly enough to need major repairs after 1300 years, why would we need 10,000 years to explain its current state? The nose is gone. The beard is gone. The uraeus cobra on the forehead is damaged. Time has been brutal, but not as brutal as some claim. The facial features remain recognizable. The head clearly represents a pharaoh wearing the Nemes headdress. The body is a reclining lion 73 meters long, 20 meters high. The scale is massive, but it's not impossibly ancient. It's 4th Dynasty monumental architecture in royal Egyptian style consistent with the period's artistic conventions. Each of 24 pillars may represent an hour in the sun's daily circuit. If you stand in the eastern niche during sunset at the March or September equinox, you see something dramatic. The sun appears to sink into the shoulder of the Sphinx, symbolic union, the king becoming one with the solar deity. This is 4th Dynasty religious architecture, sophisticated, intentional, aligned with cosmic cycles. Not primitive, not pre-dynastic. Not thousands of years earlier. Evidence suggests the work stopped suddenly. 3 stone blocks abandoned in a quarry corner, workers' tools and lunch jars left behind. The ditch surrounding the Sphinx is only partially quarried on the north edge. The workers walked off. Maybe Khafra died. Maybe priorities shifted. Maybe resources ran out. The monument was never finished, but it endured. Desert Sands began reclaiming the Sphinx. For 700 years, it sat abandoned, buried to the neck. Then, in 1425, BC, Thutmose IV had a dream. The Sphinx spoke to him, promised him kingship if he cleared the sand. Thutmose obeyed. He excavated the monument, placed the dream stele between the paws, conducted repairs. The cult of Horma kept the Sphinx as sun god flourished during the New Kingdom. Then abandonment again. More sand, more burials, cycles of excavation and neglect across millennia. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The water erosion hypothesis proposes rewriting history, pushing Egyptian monumental architecture back thousands of years, implying lost civilizations. That requires more than weathering patterns alone. Matching limestone, pottery sequences, settlement archaeology, artistic style, solar alignment, temple design, causeway connections, fossil fingerprints, dating techniques. Everything converges on 2500 BC. For the 10,000 BC date, we have vertical erosion patterns. That's it. One line of evidence, strong evidence, but not convergent. And potentially explainable through alternative mechanisms like haloclasty or construction technique. The head is member 3 harder limestone. The body is member 2 softer stone. Different weathering rates could explain size discrepancy, or maybe the sculptors simply miscalculated proportions. Ancient Egyptian art isn't always perfectly scaled. But intellectual honesty demands we follow evidence, not desires. We want ancient mysteries. We want lost knowledge. We want civilizations erased by cataclysm. Those stories are exciting. They sell. They capture imagination. But they're not what the physical record shows. The Sphinx emerged from Khafra's ambition, from 4th Dynasty Egypt's organizational capacity, from skilled workers who knew limestone and copper chisels and quarry techniques, from a culture that worshipped the sun and built resurrection machines for kings. The Sphinx doesn't need to be 10,000 years old to look battered. 5,000 years of desert exposure is plenty. Schoch acknowledged this, but argues it doesn't explain all the erosion. He's right, it doesn't explain everything, but it does complicate the interpretation. How much weathering is pre-carving? How much is post-carving? How much is construction technique? How much is haloclasty? How much is rainfall during the Old Kingdom when climate was transitioning? Parsing these factors is difficult, maybe impossible, with current methods. The Giza Plateau has been studied for 2 centuries. Mariette in 1853, Berets in 1925, Selim Hassan in 1949, Lanner from 1979 to 1983, Hawass from the 1980s to 2000s, Schoch in 1990 and 1991, Harrell in 1994, Reeder in the 2000s, Bunbury in the 2000s, Schneiker in 2025. Each added pieces, each proposed mechanisms. None solved it completely. The monument keeps its secrets, not because it's impossibly ancient, but because deterioration is complex. What we debate is whether erosion alone can overturn this convergent evidence. Mainstream science says no. Weathering patterns are ambiguous, multiple explanations fit, extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. Alternative researchers say yes, the erosion is too severe. Haloclasty can't explain the vertical channels. The Green Sahara offers a better climate match. The debate will continue until new evidence emerges. A contemporary inscription naming Khafra as builder, a pre-dynastic settlement at Giza capable of monumental architecture. Neither has been found. Still enigmatic, still pulling visitors from across the world who stand before it and wonder. That sense of wonder is real. It doesn't require the Sphinx to be 10,000 years old. The human capacity to shape stone into meaning is profound at any age. Named monuments, carved dedication inscriptions. But the Sphinx has no contemporary 4th Dynasty inscription. The first reference comes 1100 years later in Thutmose IV's Dream Stele in 1425 BC. Why the silence? If Khafra built it, why didn't he say so? Schoch argues this absence supports an older date. The Sphinx was already ancient when dynastic Egyptians arrived. They didn't know who built it. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Many 4th Dynasty monuments lack inscriptions. The pyramids have internal quarry marks, but few external dedications. Perhaps Khafra didn't need to label the Sphinx. Its connection to his complex was obvious. Perhaps inscriptions existed and eroded away. Perhaps the monument wasn't completed and never received dedication ceremonies. Silence is ambiguous. The seismic profile showed a cavity or chamber under the left paw. Schoch detected it during subsurface weathering studies. Alternative researchers claimed it might be Edgar Cayce's Hall of Records. Cayce was an American psychic who predicted a chamber beneath the Sphinx containing Atlantean knowledge. Subsequent investigations found nothing but weathered limestone. No void, no chamber, no lost library, just rock. The seismic anomaly was a natural feature or an artifact of the survey method. The Hall of Records doesn't exist except in imagination. This pattern repeats throughout Sphinx research. Anomalies get overinterpreted. Natural features become evidence of lost civilizations. Weathering becomes proof of antediluvian cultures. Silence becomes mystery. The monument deserves respect but not fantasy. In the end, the Sphinx erosion debate teaches us about the limits of single-line evidence. Geological data is valuable, weathering patterns matter, but they must be integrated with archaeology history and context. Cherry-picking one anomaly and building elaborate theories around it, while ignoring convergent evidence from other disciplines, is bad science. Schoch made a valuable contribution by forcing mainstream scholars to seriously examine the weathering. His geological expertise identified real patterns, but his interpretation pushed beyond what the evidence supports. He assumed erosion could only come from extended rainfall. He dismissed alternative mechanisms too quickly. He prioritized geology over archaeology. The synthesis approach Lehner represents is more robust. Look at everything. Weigh all factors. Don't let one anomaly overturn a mountain of convergent data. Complex. It has weathered significantly over 4,500 years. It will continue weathering. Conservation efforts are ongoing. The monument is fragile. Desert conditions are harsh. Modern pollution accelerates deterioration. Rising groundwater threatens the limestone. The Supreme Council of Antiquities fights to preserve it, not for 10,000 years, for the next century. It has survived 45 centuries of human interpretation. Greek travelers, Roman writers, medieval scholars, European explorers, modern scientists. Each generation brings new theories. Some endure, some fade. The water erosion hypothesis may be remembered as a maverick challenge that forced deeper analysis, or it may be footnoted as a fringe idea that couldn't withstand scrutiny. Time will tell. Meanwhile, the monument stares east, waiting for sunrise, as it has for millennia, eroding slowly, silently, keeping whatever secrets it actually holds, which are probably simpler and less romantic than we hope. The causeway and the Sphinx enclosure were quarried simultaneously. 4th Dynasty, 2500 BC. One more piece of convergent evidence, one more nail in the alternative chronology, one more confirmation of mainstream dating. They used copper chisels and stone hammers. The copper tools blunted after only a few blows. They had to be resharpened constantly in a charcoal forge. Working with these limitations, Brown estimated one laborer could carve 1 cubic foot of stone per week. At that rate, 100 people could complete the Sphinx in 3 years. Not impossible. Not requiring advanced technology, just organized, persistent labor with available tools. The Sphinx quarry itself tells a construction story. Workers cut terraces, stepping down into the bedrock. They carved a U-shaped sanctuary around the emerging statue. The quarrying pattern is methodical, logical, efficient. They removed blocks for the temples while simultaneously shaping the monument body. Multitasking. The abandoned blocks in the quarry corner show sudden work stoppage. 3 massive stones dragged partway, then left. Copper chisels dropped. Food jars abandoned. Something happened. Khafra died in 2532 BC. His successor Menkaure may have redirected resources to his own pyramid. The Sphinx complex was functional but incomplete. The dream was bigger than the execution. Modern analysis found traces of blue, yellow, and red pigments on the limestone surface. The monument was polychrome, not bare stone. Painted, decorated. The face glowed red in sunlight. The body showed lion's colors. The Neme's headdress bore royal patterns. Time stripped the paint away. Sand scoured it. Rain washed it. What remains is weathered substrate. We see erosion. The ancients saw art. The lower body where sand trapped moisture. The western wall where runoff collected. The marly limestone layers that weather faster when wet. The joints and fissures that predate carving. The pattern follows geology and hydrology. No mystery. Just natural processes on susceptible rock. Heavy storms still occurred during the Old Kingdom. Hawass noted that 1100 years between Khafra and the 18th dynasty restoration would have allowed significant weathering given periodic severe precipitation. Even in increasingly arid conditions, extreme weather accelerates damage. One day exceeded annual averages. Such events happened in antiquity. W.F. Hume published Geology of Egypt in 1925, documenting desert rains that produced extraordinary erosion during single storms. Schwaller de Lubitsch proposed water erosion mid-20th century. West popularized it. Shock gave it geological credibility. The 1993 NBC documentary Mystery of the Sphinx, narrated by Charlton Heston, reached millions. Alternative archaeology exploded. Graham Hancock cited it. Robert Bauval incorporated it. The monument became centerpiece of lost civilization narratives. When we weight everything the 4th dynasty date holds, Khafra's builders carved the Sphinx around 2500 BC. It weathered through haloclasty windsand, rain-dew floods, and time. 4,500 years is enough for severe deterioration, especially on soft marly limestone buried in wet sand for centuries. Study weathering mechanisms rigorously. Science advances through challenge. Schoch challenged the establishment. The establishment responded with better data. Both sides became more rigorous. The monument benefited from scrutiny. Modern conservation uses chemical consolidants and moisture barriers, but soft limestone in harsh conditions deteriorates. The goal is to slow it and preserve the monument for future generations. Each generation brings new tools and new perspectives. Each tool might shift understanding slightly, but radical revision requires radical evidence. So far, that evidence hasn't appeared. The convergent case for 4th dynasty construction remains dominant. The erosion is severe but explicable. The monument is ancient but not prehistoric. The builders were skilled but human. No lost technology required. No vanished civilizations, just Egyptians. Stone, sun, time. Facing east, waiting for sunrise each morning, for 45 centuries, through dynasties, invasions, burials, excavations, theories, debates, the limestone remembers. Not secrets, just weather.